Well, welcome back, and we're going to talk about monetary policy. Monetary policy. We're not going to be talking about the president, we're not going to be talking about Congress, whether it's the House or the Senate, and we're not going to be talking about Supreme Court. We're going to be looking at the Federal Reserve. All right, that's what we're looking at. Because the Federal Reserve manages the U.S. money supply. Right? And that's the building that they're located in. So here's where we're looking at it. Now, we talk about managing money supply. The first thing you need to look at is you need to think of money as a, how do I want to put it? You want to think of money as a good or a service. Just like we talked about when we were doing our corn example. Price of money, or there's the cost of the corn in dollars, and here was our corn. We had an equilibrium, we had a shortage, we had a surplus. Right? That's what we want to look at. When we're talking about managing money, the Federal Reserve wants to make sure we don't have too much, that could cause inflation. Make sure we don't have too little, that could cause recession. We want to be equilibrium, just right. Now, the quantity, instead of being good, is money. The price is the interest that we pay on that money. Okay, that's kind of where we're looking at it. So we're paying money for money, but in this case it's interest versus the actual dollars that we're putting out there. So that's the first thing to go ahead and do, is just try to think of money as a good or service. We don't want the surplus, don't want the shortage, we want to be at equilibrium. So with this in mind, let's take a look and grab out your first sheet. Okay, this is the monetary policy note sheet, and you'll find that in the MP module. Because what we want to look at is monetary policy is nothing more than the Federal Reserve nudging us. Okay? The Federal Reserve is basically the Bank of the United States. And we're going to get into what the Federal Reserve is and that in a little while. All they want to do is they want to influence or manage the money supply. Influence meaning they may want to nudge us in a certain direction. Manage, they want to make sure that there's not too much of a supply or shortage. They want to keep us right around equilibrium. Not too much, not too little, just right, kind of like the three bears. And they're going to do it through interest rates. Okay, because when we have too much, think about it as a bank. If you are a bank and you want people to borrow money and nobody's coming to borrow from you, you might have to lower your interest rate so that people will go, oh, I can get a loan cheaper over there. So that's what we're looking at. To help grow an economy and raise the people's standard of living. That's the Federal Reserve's reason for living right there. Okay? So how do we know it's just right? Go ahead and get the right amount of money note sheet. This is in your textbook, and this is something that everybody continues to have questions or concerns on and doesn't understand it. So let's take a look. We're going to break it down line by line as we go through this. Okay? First thing is what we call the transaction demand for money. In other words, how much money do I need for the absolute necessities? Right? This is the stuff I need to have the money for. I need to pay bills. Right? And so this is the money that I have to pay. When you get your paycheck, first thing you should do is make sure you pay your rent and pay your mortgage. So in this example, what it's showing is this first now we'll say it's $100 billion. This first $100 billion we have to have no matter what. That's why the line goes straight up and down. It doesn't make any difference what the interest rate is. We have to have this first $100 billion so that we don't get thrown out of our house and we can eat and that kind of stuff. All right? That's the transaction demand for money, or the D with the little t. All right? This is the stuff we absolutely need. So that's what we're looking at. Now the second one is what we call the asset demand for money. This is the other stuff that, ooh, I'd like to have. The first one was need. Now, I'd like to have it. And here's where interest rates come into play. If it's a no interest loan, we're probably going to borrow a lot of money to get a lot of stuff that we want. But as the interest starts going up, instead of the $200 billion that we would borrow if it was zero interest rate, as the interest rate goes up, we start looking to borrow less and less and less money. Right? That's the asset demand for money, or the D with the little a. Okay? So, understanding those two. The asset demand relies on the interest rates, and the transaction demand does not rely on interest rates. We need a place to live. I'd like a new computer. I already got one, but I'd like a new one. All right? That's kind of where the two go hand in hand here. So now, what we're going to do is we're going to put the two of them together. And this is where that graph does, because it doesn't start here. It starts at that transaction demand for money. That one was there. But if you remember, the asset demand for money started over here. But it doesn't. Because here's the first part of our spending. Here's the second part of our spending. So this does not rely on an interest rate, but all of these do. So this is our total spending here. This is part one, part two, if you want to look at it that way. So now the book goes ahead and puts in an interest rate. 5%. So we take a 5% over here and we go down. $200 billion is what we need at the 5% interest rate to be in equilibrium. So we will have $200 billion no matter the interest rate, because we've identified equilibrium being at 5%. So what the Federal Reserve is going to look at is to make sure there's $200 billion in our money supply. All right, that's in all the banks and everything else, in our pockets, the whole bit. So that's what they're talking about this. This part here, that's what they call the stock of money, or S with the little m on it. So we got the total money demand and the stock of money at an interest rate. And that's all that is. At 5%, we're going to do $200 billion. Any questions? If you do, send me an email. Or actually talk it over at the conference. But that's all this thing is looking at. Alright, now let's go back to that sheet and talk about what actually is money. Okay? Can you eat money? Alright? Well, you can put it in your mouth and chew it and everything, but it doesn't taste as good as a donut. It's also not going to go ahead and keep you alive if all you're doing is eating money. Also, are you going to be able to be in a nice, comfortable home with that money? Well, I mean, I guess you can hold it over your head, but you're still going to get cold and wet and everything else. You're not going to be all comfy like our little puppy dog here. Right? Money is not a thing that we want. Money is the tool that we use to get what we want. And we get it through purchasing power. In other words, how much of that dollar do I need to buy things? Right? How much can I buy with it? Now, in 1970, that $1 could have got me 3+ gallons of gasoline. In 2017, it got me, about a little bit more than half a gallon of gasoline. Today, it get me more than a gallon of gasoline. But that's what I mean by purchasing power. How much of this stuff can I buy with this? Right? That's the idea of purchasing power. Why did it go from 3+ to less than 1? We call this inflation. Because the dollar bill may be the same thing, but inflation eats the purchasing power away from it. And we can't buy as many things as we used to be able to buy with it. So purchasing power and inflation, big things to keep in mind when we start talking about money. Now, uses of money. First off, it's what we call a medium of exchange. We can exchange things with it. All right, we go to Walmart, give them money, we can get a steak. If you own the cow and you want to sell milk, but all I want is a steak, you can't carve up the cow, give me the steak, and still have a cow that's going to give milk. Right? So, medium of exchange. Measure of value. It tells you how valuable things are. What's the difference between a chunk of coal and a diamond? How much each one of them cost. That's one of the big things. The purchasing power of each one when we talk about money. And then it stores value. The purchasing power is still going to be here in this thing. Unless you have runaway inflation, the purchasing power does not change month to month, week to week, day to day, hour to hour. Now, in some countries it has, and Venezuela is a good example of it. Right? Now, characteristics of money. First off, it's divisible. In other words, if I want to buy a steak, I can take a $20 bill, get the steak, and get change. I don't have to worry about carving up old Bessie there. Right? It's also portable. I can take it places with ease. Right? I can either carry cash, I can carry a credit card, I can carry a debit card, but it's kind of hard if I'm flying to New York or LA or San Francisco to put Bessie in my pocket. Right? Can't do that. So it's portable, it's easy to use. Remember, we want to make this easy exchanges because if it's easy, we can go ahead and have a better standard of living. Remember, that's what we're focusing on, standard of living. It's also durable. Okay? Take your dollar bill, go like this, and it won't rip apart. How many of you have put the dollar bill or left it in your pants pocket and all of a sudden comes out of the washing machine? It's still a dollar bill. Try that with your homework. It doesn't work as well. So it is durable. It's there to last a long time. And it's secure. In other words, it's safe. It's a real United States dollar. North Korea is a country that tends to try to counterfeit our money a lot because they're broke. And they go ahead and try to go ahead and get our money as much as possible. So when we look at this, the characteristics, divisible, portable, durable, and secure. But it also has to have value. In other words, when you go to the store and you hand them $1, they're going to take it in exchange for something on the shelf. Okay? I remember I was in at the flea market, bought a book, and as I went through the book, I found this 50,000, I guess, dollar for that country bill sitting in that book. I go, wow, I got a lot of cash. And then I quickly Googled it and found out I had 3/10 of a cent right there in the book. But it had 50,000 printed on it. It has to be acceptable. People have to be able to accept the money. It also has to be legal. Now, the neat thing about ours is this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, which technically means that if you go to a store and they have this sign that says we don't accept anything over a $20 bill, well, legally, they have to accept it. But to make that happen, you'd have to go to court, and you would win, but it would take time and effort and probably more money than it was worth. So we just kind of go with what the store says because it's a safety thing for them. But legal tender. And it has to be scarce. Remember those dollar bills we talked about? This is a 1,000 lira note. And it's Italy before they went into the European Union. And Italy had a problem with debt. So they decided what they were going to do is they were just going to ramp up production. They were going to print money. Which, by the way, every country does, and we're printing a lot of it right now in the coronavirus recession. Okay? But remember, if I have a dollar bill and I print another one, both of them now have the same purchasing power, except my original dollar bill has a little bit less. I print a third dollar bill, and that third dollar bill, while it has the same purchasing power as the second and the first, all three of them, or the second and the third, have lost more of their purchasing power. So every time you print more money, just to print more money, the purchasing power of the money, the original money, goes down. And what ended up happening, they printed so much of this that you needed 35,000 lira just to go ahead and buy a Big Mac meal. And that's regular, not supersized. Right? 35,000 lira to get that. It has to be scarce. Now, along with that, you got to remember, we use that money to influence, not too much, not too little, just right, through the interest rates. Helps us grow our standard of living. But how do we know how much we have? Well, we got three measures. The first one is called M1, or monies. Now, currency is the first part of that. Currency, that's the paper stuff here. Okay? We also call it fiat, or cash. It's also coins. Currency is also demand deposits or checking accounts. So those are the two key things. Because remember, we said the Federal Reserve wants to know how much money is there. Remember that little graph we put on here and said we needed to make sure there was $200 billion in our money supply. Well, the first thing, they know how much cash that they printed and how many coins they made, and the banks report how much cash are in the demand deposit accounts. So they can see that really quick. Now that's the first measure, but that's not the measure that they really use. The one that they use is what's called M2 monies. Now the first thing I want to point out is part of M2 is all of M1. So they know that part. Then they take a look at three other general areas. The first is small-time deposits, certificates of deposit. Okay, and again, they just check with the banks to find out how many are there. They look at money market funds. They check with the money market companies, and they know how much is there. And savings deposits. Again, they check with the banks, they know how much is there. This is the one we use. Now, the thing about M2, we call it near monies, is M1 we can spend right away. We pull it out of our wallet, we sign the check, and boom, we can spend it and get stuff. Near monies, there's an additional process we have to do. For a small time deposit, yeah, we can go ahead and sell the certificate of deposit, but it would, first off, we got to take the certificate to the bank to get money. So we have one step before we can spend it. Money market funds, same thing. We have to go ahead and take one step before we spend it. Now, a lot of money market funds, they'll go ahead and give you checks that you can sign. But the minimum is like $250 or $500. So try to go to Walmart and write a $250 money market check to buy something at Walmart. Walmart's going to say, nah, I don't think so. So you have to go to a bank or to your brokerage house, sign the check, and they give you the cash. Savings deposits, you used to actually have to go in and change it around. Today you can go online and you can do a real quick shift the money from savings to checking and then spend it. Or you can go ahead, well, I've got this thing in there, if I go over my checking account, they'll automatically take it from my savings account, which they will. But most of you probably don't know that most banks charge you money to do that. Even though it's set up, it might charge you $5 or $10 to make the transfer. But if you do it yourself, it's free. So keep that in mind the next time you think about it. So that's the M2 money. The last one is M3, which first off is all the M2 money, but it has all the rest of the money in the system, which is basically other restrictive deposits and funds, your IRAs, your 401ks, and large time deposits. Those are the pensions that various companies have put into whatever investment they have, because these you can't really spend right away. These, there may be some restrictions. You can only spend it for education or a house. Or you got to wait until you're 59 and a half or 60 or 70 or whatever the heck it is before you can start pulling money out of there. So because we can't spend these right away, we don't worry about this. This, M2, is the equilibrium point we try looking at all the time. So this is what the sheet should look like. And this ends our first session.